Feelings. Jeez. The truth is, for so long, I'd forgotten what those even were. I've been stuck in one place. In a cave, you might say. A deep, dark cave. And then I left some echoes out in the woods, and you came into my life. And for the first time in a long time, I started to feel things again. I started to feel happy. But lately, I guess I've been feeling distant from you, like you're pulling away from me or something. I miss playing board games every night, making triple-decker Eggo extravaganzas at sunrise, watching Westerns together before we doze off. But I know you're getting older and growing and changing. And I guess, if I'm being really honest, that's what scares me. I don't want things to change. So I think maybe that's why I came here, to try to maybe stop that change, to turn back the clock, to make things back to how they were. So you know what? That's naive. It's just not how life works. It's moving, always moving, whether you like it or not. And yeah, sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's sad, and sometimes it's surprising, happy. But keep on growing up, kid. Don't let me stop you. Make mistakes, learn from them. And when life hurts you, because it will, remember the hurt. The hurt is good. It means that you're out of that cave. But please, if you don't mind, for the sake of your poor old dad, keep the door open at least 3 inches. Listeners, you're in for a treat today, because today we are here with actor Kaiser Johnson to talk about Stranger Things.
Welcome to Pop Culture Catechism, conversations about music, movies, and the longings of the human heart. Let's get started.
Are you cool, or are you a nerd? Which would you rather be? Which gets you more friends? Let me ask you this. Which gets you better friends? What even makes for a good or a true friendship? And what about when romance gets in the way of that friendship? What about when friendships are disrupted by evil monsters from a parallel universe and it's all happening in the 80s? Today we're talking about Stranger Things, Netflix's biggest show of all times, and season 4 is coming out in 2 volumes this summer in May and July. And here we are talking with Kaiser Johnson, who was an actor in season 3. He had a small but conspicuous and memorable role as a jazzercise instructor who turned out to be more than meets the eye. He's also an actor, and we're very excited to have him here with us. My name is Mike Tenney. I'm a Catholic speaker and worship leader from Washington, D.C. I spent over a decade teaching Catholic high school education and teaching theology, and also trying to make it big as a rock star at night. And now I'm blessed to speak with thousands of people each year through various events and through Pop Culture Catechism, this show. This is Pop Culture Catechism. It is the gospel according to pop music and movies, where we try to find God's love in the media that you're plugged into. So then after the show, when we unplug and take our earbuds out and turn our phones off, that we can go out into the world and actually live that love. A special thank you to our patrons who make this show possible through the popculturecatechism.com and the Awaken app. And our goal for you today is, by the end of this episode, not only will you have a greater appreciation for Stranger Things, but you'll also have some ways in your life that you can love God and know God's love for you and love other people as well. I'm happy to introduce to the show today actor and author of Grit and Glory and How to Be Miserable Alone. He writes for our Sunday Visitor and Catholic Digest, Kaiser Johnson. Kaiser, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I'm very happy that you're here. So Kaiser, I told the people a little bit about you, but tell them, who are you?
So I'm a Catholic dad, husband, and I happen to do acting and voiceover to pay the bills. And it's something that has been, that I've been really blessed to be able to do and to feel called to a certain extent, for the last longer than I'd like to admit. So that's kind of a quick and dirty about me. I like reading. I like walks by the beach. I like writing too. And,
awesome.
So yeah.
And you have a new book out right now, right?
What's that?
You have a new book that just came out, yeah?
Yeah, so How to Be Miserable and Alone is the unfortunately true story of, it's unfortunately a nonfiction book about my life and all the places that I've taken the advice of really well-intentioned people and media and worldly advice, and ignored the great treasure of the advice of saints in the church, and how that's turned out for me. So that's and then it also tells parts of the story about when things have gone really well, when I've not listened to bad advice and listened to good advice.
Awesome. Very good. Well, so I remember watching, so Stranger Things has like a special place in my heart. And listeners, if you don't know what Stranger Things is, it is, as I said before, it's the biggest show that's ever been on Netflix. It's like their flagship show right now. It's just about coming out with its 4th season, and it has a special place in my heart because back in 2016, when my wife was pregnant with our first daughter, over the summer, this show was just coming out, and she like couldn't sleep at night, and I've always been a night owl, so we would frequently stay up till like 2 or 3 or 4 a.m. and it was over the summer, and I was a teacher, so I didn't have to wake up early anyway before we had kids. And so we binged Stranger Things like late into the night over the course of 3 or 4 days. And it was like a week before she gave birth. And then season 2 came out next year, and season 3 came out right before my son was born in 2019. And so I feel like this show is just, it always brings up good memories for me and my wife watching the show. So I've always liked it. And in season 3, some minor spoilers, there's this scene where they're in the mall, the kids are in the mall, and they're looking for Russians, and they see you, and they're like, oh, that guy's totally a Russian spy. And you're walking through, and then you turn out to be this jazzercise instructor, and you got like this pink tank top on, and you're like doing these hip thrusts. And they're like, oh, maybe he's not a Russian. But then later you turn out to actually be a Russian. So anyway, it was just, and then I found out, oh, this guy Kaiser Johnson, he's Catholic, and he writes, and so I've been following you for a little while, and I knew when season 4 came out, I was like, all right, I got to reach out to this guy. So I reached out, and you got back to me, and here we are. So I'm really happy about that. So what do you like about this show, Stranger Things?
I mean, I think I had a similar experience to you and your wife of just seeing the first episode in the week it came out in 2016, and then I was like, I guess I'm not doing anything the next couple of nights because this is what we're doing. Yeah, I mean, I just went from that first moment where like the light flickers and goes out and Will's gone, and then and then boom, those chords come on of the music, and it's like, oh my gosh, what's happening?
The music is so good.
Yeah. And so it was my favorite show, and I loved just the characters, that friendship that's right at the core of it, obviously. So, I was I grew up not with a lot of friends and stuff, and I mean, I still don't have like a lot of friends. I have a couple of close friends, but now I'm married, so friends don't matter as much. But it was something where it really resonated for me of again, this deep friendship, and these kids who are kind of on the outside of that, and they're okay with it, but also they are searching for belonging and that kind of thing. And that, really felt true to me. And I think it feels true to a lot of people. I think that's one of the big reasons that Stranger Things is so successful, is not just how fun the world of this stylized 80s is, and how fun the homages that the Duffer Brothers are always paying to all these kind of cultural touchstones of the 80s and that kind of thing. But this aspect of friendship and love right at the center of this, you've got this a mother's love, and then these friends' love for each other, and then how all of that is complicated by just growing up. And so, yeah. Yeah,
I love a few of the things that you said are also things that I love. I love kind of the 80s tableau. It's kind of like a love letter to the 80s. And you can go on YouTube and like look for all the 80s references and Stranger Things. And it's like crazy things I've never even heard of. But it was like lots of E.T. references, lots of Goonies references, Jaws references. It's really cool. The music, as you said, I really love. I like that I'm not a huge fan of scary stuff. But this show, it like has enough humanity and heart. I feel like a lot of horror stuff, the characters are just kind of fodder, they're just fodder for the monster to kill, but these characters really grab you, and that's the heart and soul of the show. And then it's not so scary and bloody that, I'm like I said, I'm not really into horror and that sort of thing, but this show I really like it. And as you said, I think my favorite thing about it is just the characters. The acting is so good. The relationships between them are so good. So that's where I think we're going to spend most of our time today, is talking about these relationships. So just a quick rundown of who's in the show. There's the four main friends: Mike, Will, Lucas, and Dustin. Will is the one that ends up kind of the one in trouble. He ends up kind of possessed by the Upside Down, and there's different incarnations of this parallel universe. And the season 1's like the Demogorgon, and season 2 it's the Demogorgon dogs, and season 3 it's the Mind Flayer. But they all seem to be going after Will in one way or another. And then in the later seasons, we get Maxine, who ends up in a relationship with Lucas. And then we get 11, of course, who's this orphan superpower girl, who ends up in a relationship with Mike. And then there's kind of the second tier is the teenagers, where you get Nancy, who's not Will's older brother, Mike's older sister. And you get Steve, kind of the cool guy, boyfriend. You get Jonathan, who's Will's older brother. You get Billy, who's Max's older brother. You get Robin, the girl at the ice cream shop. And then you get Erica, Lucas's little sister. And so there's just these great, and then the third tier, I would say, are the adults. And the two main are Joyce Byers, Will's mom, and Jim Hopper, who's the local detective, who I think his family isn't really in the show, but he lost a daughter, and then a few years ago, and so I think his wife and him are not together anymore. Right. But there's something for everybody. There's something for the kids. There's something for the teenagers. There's something for the adults, and I feel that's another strength of the show, is it hits all these different dynamics between brothers and sisters, friends and friends, boyfriends and girlfriends, adults and kids, adults and adults. It's got all these different dynamics going on, and they're just really well done in the midst of all this 80s horror stuff. So there's being very much a trope of 80s movies. There's like the nerds and then the cool kids. And so I wanted to talk, you said you didn't have a whole lot of friends growing up. I think, I kind of was a nerd when I was younger. When I got to the end of high school, I was a little more popular. And I feel like everybody, no matter how popular you were, everyone's had that experience of feeling like a nerd. So I want to talk about the experience of nerds, maybe for anyone out there who's felt like a nerd, which is probably most people. So, so were you a nerd? Would you say that you were a nerdy kid?
Yeah, well, yeah, I still am. It's funny because I remember I was in a sketch comedy show for a while it was a live sketch comedy show in Los Angeles, and after one of our, I'd been doing it I'd done 6 or 7 episodes or something, and shows, I guess, and a couple of the writers came up to me, and one of them was like, "Okay, so Kaiser, explain this to us. So you don't look like someone who was stuffed in a lot of lockers in high school. So tell us how you got to be funny." And I was like, "Oh, well, I was homeschooled." And they're like, "Oh, okay,
that explains it. There it is."
Yeah. So I like I said, didn't have a lot of friends, and definitely, something that like I still find fun is and is probably not something I should be, again, is socially acceptable to be doing, is like, I can name all the presidents in order. Do you want to hear them? And, stuff like that. And, give me, just say a country in the world. I'll tell you its capital. It's a fun party trick. And it's like, that's not a party trick. That's a really nerdy thing that you do. And most people don't really care about it.
So I think this is kind of gets into like what kind of makes a person a nerd. Is the first thing we were talking about before is not feeling like they fit in, not feeling like one of the cool kids. But the second thing is what you were just talking about, is a love of something that not everybody else loves. And I actually think like that is so admirable about nerds. And it's something that, in myself, and as I'm growing up and maturing, like learning that like just because other people don't like something, Like I can still like that thing. And just because other people like something doesn't mean I have to like that thing. I can have unpopular opinions. And I think, it's a temptation for me to be a people pleaser, to want to fit in, to not rock the boat. I think it's a temptation for a lot of people. But one thing I really admire about nerds is that, like, you know what? I love Pokemon, and I don't care if you do. I want to know these random things about the presidents. And I think there's something really holy in that, is that we're supposed to delight in the goodness and the beauty and the truth that we see in the world, right? Like that's a virtue, to see something good that is a reflection of God in some way and delight in it and be like, look how awesome this is, and geeking out about it. And that's a way I want to be nerdier, right? So, so I love stuff like that. I love getting into things and just appreciating them because they're beautiful and not what anybody else thinks. And I think there's a real freedom in that. And there can even be a real mysticism in that, where you do it is kind of just like, it's me and God thing, like this is a good thing. And even though nobody else knows about this book, or nobody else knows about this hobby, or nobody else is into this thing, it's like an experience of beauty and goodness that I can kind of dwell in and delight in. So I think there's a real mysticism to being a nerd that can be really holy. So yeah.
Well, and I think there's an aspect too, and I would almost draw a distinction between people who are this is going to sound super arrogant, but like there are like true nerds, and then there are people who are like, now it's trendy to be a nerd, so now I'm going to be a nerd too, and so I'm going to get excited about it. Like there is the nerd who is an evangelist for the thing that they love. Mm-hmm. And it's because they have a true love of that thing.
Yeah.
And then there's the nerd who is threatened by other people actually liking the things that they do. Mm-hmm. Not to bash on hipsters and stuff again, but this idea that you are, that as something becomes more accepted and more people like something, the less you must love it because it's mainstream, or it's something like that. And they don't love it. I liked it first, and I think for a nerd, like what a wonderful thing that is. If you're into Pokemon and everyone was into Pokemon, like if you really like Pokemon, how great is that you can talk about Pokemon with anyone? You can,
yes,
play Pokemon with anyone. I'm not into Pokemon, so I don't know.
Yeah, me neither. But yeah,
I think you use that as an example. But if you are, if you are upset about more people loving it, that tells you it's not a true love in the first place, I think.
Yes. I totally agree. Like in my life, I was into Lord of the Rings, and I'd read it like 3 times before the movies had ever come out, because my dad was into it and my brothers were into it. And it was kind of like a rite of passage when you got into middle school and high school, that our dad like took the trilogy of Lord of the Rings and like gave it to you and was like, it's time, you can read this. And so I was already way into Tolkien. And the fact that now everybody's into Tolkien, and there's video games and there's new shows coming out. We'll probably do an episode on it at some point in this show. I'm like, this is great. I can talk about Tolkien with everybody. But there are some people who, when something becomes cool, they're like, oh, I was into it before it was cool, but I kind of like the hipster mentality, as you were saying. Now it's too current. And, so I think there's something interesting going on there, is I think with being a nerd, we feel excluded because deep in our hearts, in every heart, there is a desire to be loved, right? There's a desire to be known. And when you feel excluded, or you feel like you don't love the same things that other people love, or you feel like you're on the outs, like you're really missing that full acceptance. That can only come from God, right? We can get it only fully from God in the fullness of heaven and the resurrection, but we can get it in some small ways through healthy relationships in this life. And that's what our heart is really yearning for. But there's also a part of our heart that wants to be ourselves, that wants to be our true identity, that wants to be different and wants to stand out and still be accepted for that. And so I think the nerd is in this interesting place of wanting that validation, wanting that love and affirmation, but also recognizing there's something in this that's different about me, and I like that it's different about me. So anyway, I think there's 2 key things that I can learn from the nerd, and I can learn from the nerdy parts of myself, is to when I'm feeling left out, like really I'm looking for love and validation, mostly from God. Like that's the only thing that's ever going to really satisfy me. I can get it through these, in some ways through these other healthy relationships, but then also like those things that are different about me, like those can be real points of a healthy sort of pride and self-confidence and like gratitude that God has put this in me. So I think there's kind of this tension between wanting to belong and wanting to be different. And that's the beautiful thing about Christianity is, and the vision of heaven and the resurrection is in this unity, we don't lose our identity. I think C.S. Lewis talks about like the unity of hell is a uniformity. And sinners end up looking a lot the same, but the variety of the saints is beautiful. And there's a unity in heaven that doesn't like squash the diversity of the individual personalities. So anyway, that's kind of what that makes me think of. So.
But it's you don't lose yourself to become one with God.
Yes.
And
Amen. Yeah. Amen. So my older brother Dave, he's kind of the nerd of the family. I mean, we're all pretty nerdy. I'm one of three brothers, but if you ask my family, like I'm kind of the outgoing one. I'm kind of the quote unquote popular one. I have a ton of friends. I just like mixing and mingling. Like some people hate small talk. I love small talk. I love like getting to go and talk to people. My brother Dave, he has always had like three friends. Like in middle school, he had three friends. In high school, he had 4 or 5 friends. He got to college, immediately like became friends with this tight group. They're still friends to this day, even though he graduated college a long time ago, and they like still get together. And me, I'm like always trying to make new friends with new people, and we're very different. But there's some ways in which I envy him because there's a depth to those relationships. And not that I don't have deep friendships, but I think there's a wisdom in investing in a few friendships and not always trying to get everybody to like you like I do most of the time. So I don't know. Do you tell me about your friendships? What are your who are your friends?
I think I'm much more. Dave was your brother's name?
Yeah.
And I'm much more like him in the sense of like I don't dislike people or anything like that. I have a fair amount of friend acquaintances and buddies and stuff like that. But I think my circle of actual friends is very small. It's it's 2 or 3 people. And well, maybe it's a little bigger than that. All right, but anyway, and those are people with I think. To harken back to C.S. Lewis, and he talks about the 4 loves of that that sense of philia and philios and agape, where that to me those friendships that mean the most to me are ones where it's 2 people standing side by side facing the same direction, and where we both have goals that we share, and that's something that has bonded us, and so we can talk about anything. We're vulnerable with each other. We're because we know that in the end we want the same things, and we need the other person's perspective and help. A threefold cord is not easily broken, and so having close people by your side who want the best for you, and it also happens to align with what they want for themselves, and so you're on a journey together. And I think I have a very select few of those friendships, but they mean a lot to me, and so
that's really beautiful. That quote that you said, it's like two people facing the same direction, something like that.
Yes.
What did you say?
It's a friendship of 2 people standing side by side facing the same direction.
I think Bishop Barron has a great YouTube video on this about Aristotle's perspective on friendship, and I think this is where that idea comes from, and it's been adopted into Christianity because it works so well with, like, of course, what are we looking towards? What's that third thing that we love? Is, of course, Christ. And he talks about it also in terms of Bishop Barron also talks about it in terms of marriage. There's this old marriage prep book called 3 to Get Married. Just this idea that in a marriage, like God is really in there, and it's two of you working together in this cooperative effort. And mysteriously, that brings you more closer together than if you were just focused on each other.
My old spiritual director and confessor, he said, for the last 150 years, we've looked at marriage as the romantic ideal, where it's like two people whose love for each other in the sense of erotic love, of eros, of this. But actually, even our understanding of eros is pretty tainted, and it's fascinating to read The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis and see, this erotic love is such a deeper thing than what we treat it as. But that's what we've focused. We thought marriage is two people love each other so much they just have to get married, And he said for the entirety of the rest of the understanding of the institution of marriage in Judeo-Christian tradition, it's been looked at as the heroic ideal. Two people who are who are, as Chesterton would say, are incompatible. They build this bridge and this life together through heroic striving to be the best that they can be for the other person and to draw the best out of the other person. And I think in large ways, like that's why I think that's what a true friendship is drawing the best out of another person as you strive together.
Yes. Amen. Love it. All right, so let's talk. I was going to talk about cool kids next. We talked about nerds. I was going to talk about cool kids, but now we're talking about love. So I think we've got to talk about love because in the show, in seasons 2 and 3, there start to be all these romances. I guess there's some in season 1 with Steve and Nancy, but Mike and Eleven start dating, and Lucas and Max start dating, and there's all this young love, and Mike and Eleven are just like hilariously gross, and they're just like always making out. And I don't know. Did you date a lot growing up?
No.
All right. So that's probably wise. My listeners are used to hearing my stories, and I would say I probably dated too much. Yes, and I just the scenes of Mike and Eleven, and where they're just making out. And there's just like, I have somebody I can kiss whenever I want to. Like, this is awesome, and they're just like so gross about it. I was just like, man, that's a little too close to home for me. I'm not like bragging. I'm not like glorifying it or anything. I'm just saying like. Anyway, but so let's, you're married and you have, how many kids do you have?
2 and 1 on the way.
2, congratulations. That's awesome. I have 2 as well. And so let's, as a little bit older guys, let's give our younger listeners some dating advice. Do you have any dating advice you would give to your younger self?
Well, I guess it's weird because it's twofold, and it runs into that wonderful paradox theme that is so endemic to Christianity. I think it is. I would say, I wish the advice that I'd given myself earlier was date more, but let the dating period of any relationship be very short. And in the sense of like, I found, I went through, and you can read all about it in my book. I went, I again, did not date much at all. And then I, had a wedding in the Catholic Church and stuff. And it was not a real marriage. And so we went through it was a really tough few years, and then separated and submitted a case for the church to look at it as if there was grounds for an annulment, and the church found that. And that was a long, like, 1.5-year process from separation to annulment. And but it was one of the more important and transformative kind of experiences of my life, was going through that and having it take all this time, and not being free in that time. And it totally changed my perspective on love and on what I should be looking for in in relationship, and it showed me who I was in a relationship and where I was broken and needed to change, and stuff like that. And so it was a really profound experience. And so if there's anyone who's in an irregular situation as far as marriage goes, I encourage you to go through the annulment process. It can be really valuable. Anyway.
Wow. No, thank you for sharing that. And just to pause, I think in, those of us in ministry, I've been in ministry most of my professional life. We always try to give people the vision of like, this is what like the thriving Christian life looks like. This is why you should be all in for Jesus. And this is like the beauty of what I found, and I hope you can find. And that's an important part of like sharing the gospel. But I feel like sometimes when things don't go according to plan, and they almost never go, everyone's got some issues. Like nobody's life is perfect. Everybody's life hits a snag. Even, Christ doesn't offer us like a perfect, drama-free life. I feel like especially my friends who have been separated, gotten annulments, been divorced, a lot of times they feel like they're just all alone in the church. Mm-hmm. They just feel like they're like castigated, like, can I even go back to church? If I've done this, how do I start dating again? Is anybody going to want to date me if I've been through this? And so just so listeners, if there are any of you out there who you've gotten an annulment, you've been divorced, you've been separated, just know that my heart is with you. And, I hope that if there's any lack of love for you that you've found, if you've ever found a lack of love from the church after those experiences, that you wouldn't let it drive a wedge between you and God. And just know that there are people who you're still part of the body of Christ. You're still part of the church, and if there are people that are not treating you right, just on behalf of the church in what small way I can, I'm sorry for that. Because I've seen that pain, and I know that it is really painful. So thank you for sharing that. I know that's a lot of people's story. So
yeah, well, and it can be to people who are maybe divorced or divorced and remarried, or and something like that, and have not gone through the annulment process. It can. I understand it can be scary because and it was for me too. This idea of you're taking this and you're saying you're not saying you don't have a final say in the decision. But there's something freeing in that too, in going, I am willing to be open and willing to be vulnerable, and I'm willing to take a really hard look at myself and see what who am I in relationship, and obviously my situation was not one where there was abuse or or stuff like that where but even in all of it, there's this opportunity to learn better what it means to love if you give yourself that opportunity in the annulment process. And there's a point where near the very end of the annulment process, when all the testimony had been collected and stuff like that, they give you an opportunity to read the testimony of everybody that you've called as a witness, everybody that the other person has called as a witness, and your own statements again, and your former partner's statements again. And I went in and I went down to the Archdiocesan offices in Los Angeles, and I sat down for 3 hours and read through all the stuff, and it's painful. It's not fun, but and I asked, but it was super important to just see like what people saw from the outside, what I saw from the inside, what the other person unfiltered kind of felt, and to go. And I asked the nun who ran that program there. I said, like, how do most people do this and come in? And she said, no, less than 10%, maybe 1 out of 10 people comes in and reads the testimony. And to me, it was something that was invaluable to kind of start that process of moving forward.
Yeah.
And in that post annulment, I dated a lot more, where I would take a girl out on a date, and to me it was like in especially I think in the Christian world, Catholic world, we can put a lot of pressure on dates. And just like, oh, someone asked me, a guy asked me out, I'm he wants to marry me. I'm sure of it. And, or a guy being like, well, I can't ask her out because I don't know that I want to marry her, and stuff like that. And it's like, no, a date is like, I find you interesting.
Mhm.
I wonder if I would find you interesting in a one-on-one setting where,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So I think it's very important to do a lot more dating. I also think it's very important to not muddy up a date or two with, lots of physical stuff and these ideas of like forever things, so being true both in our intentions and what we say of going like, hey, I would like to get to know you better, and I would love to take you out for dinner, something like that. That's a true statement. My purpose here is to get to know you better, and that kind of thing, and that we also speak truth with our bodies and use that to the appropriate level that we're at, where we don't spend date 1 or 2, making out and getting physical. Is like, because that's, if I'm just trying to get to know you better, it's not really helping me.
Yeah. So I love that idea of speaking truth with the relationship and with your body. And I think that comes from the teachings of the theology of the body, John Paul II, who was our Pope 2 popes ago.
And verbiage from that,
sure. It's just it's a really beautiful way. I remember my friends Dan and Kelly in high school, not in high school, in college, they were giving a college kind of chastity talk. They were dating at the time, and this was one of the ideas they expressed. And it's always been kind of like a guiding light for me ever since, when I'm thinking about like, how far is too far? What's appropriate for this relationship? Is like, does this speak truth? Okay, on a first date, you reach over and grab the girl's hand. Okay, if the date's going well, like that could be appropriate. That could be a true statement of affection for that level. Okay, but like to have sex on a first date, like you're binding your genetic code together. Like you're not being honest about the level of the relationship. Okay, there's like body fluids and chemicals going off. You're gonna remember that person forever, unless you're like high on drugs or something like that. That is a dishonest act, and until you have committed actually and said, I'm going to give myself to you, freely, totally, completely. I'm open to children with you, to engage in that act, which is going to physically bond you and maybe create a child, is somehow dishonest. I've heard it called, it's somehow a schizophrenic act almost. It's saying one thing with your body and another thing in actuality. And my students, whenever we were talking about this in class, they'd always be like, well, Mr. Tenney, what if you know you're with the person you're going to marry? One, I would say, like, you haven't actually committed to that person. Even if you have, even if you know, you haven't actually committed. And the other thing I said is, you know how many girls I thought were the one before I actually got married? Every single one. Every girl I ever dated, at some point, I was like, oh, she's the one. In a moment of passion, when you got all the feels going, like you can really easily convince yourself, especially if you put yourself in kind of a compromised situation, maybe nobody else is home. Maybe you're watching Stranger Things in the basement with the lights off, and it's real easy to convince yourself in that moment, oh, well, we're going to be together forever. So like, why not? But it's still not being honest. Right. And so I think that's a really good guiding light. Actually, on my YouTube channel, on this YouTube channel, I actually did a Mr. Tenney's, this was for my students back in the day, but I did Mr. Tenney's 4 rules for not going too far. So if you're interested in that, listeners, you can go check out my YouTube channel under the playlist, under Ask Mr. T. There's a How Far is Too Far. I give you 4 rules for not going too far, which I always found helpful. I want to go back for a second to what you were saying about annulments. Just first of all, thank you again for sharing that. I didn't know we were going to go there. You never know where the show is going to go, but thank you for going there, and thank you for being vulnerable, because I think it really will help some people. But I think a friend of mine, she told me this once. I think it's easy in the Catholic Church. There's so much hierarchy. There's so much administration. There's so many rules. There's like so much in canon law and doctrine and so forth. It's easy to see the Catholic Church as kind of like this cold, calculating, bureaucratic structure. You know what I mean? Yeah. And annulments, I know, can feel that way. And marriages, I know, can feel that way. Well, you can't get married outside, and you have to go through 6 months of this. You have to go to pre-canon. Like, it can seem like there's just a lot of rules. And my friend, what she said to me one time is, she says, anytime you're struggling with a rule from the church, remember that its foundation is in love and that its purpose is in love. There's a reason the church is asking you to do this. And when I think about your story and what you were sharing about, this process was hard and I had to go through it, but like, it sounds like it really helped you. It was really good. And you had that spirit, you had that mindset of not just like, all right, I got to check the boxes and jump through the hoops, but like, this seems like a real kind of way of the cross for you, that you were submitting yourself to this and humbling yourself and really trying to do the spiritual work. And I think the story that you shared is really beautiful in that it shows us that, these rules of the church that the church has, they're really meant to guide us in love. And anyway, so I just wanted to say that, and thank you again for sharing that, because it's a story that not a lot of people hear, but it's happening a lot in our churches. So
it is. I mean, by and large, I think in at least the American Catholic world, the statistics for divorce are almost the same as they are in the culture at large, and so it's something where being ministered to, like divorced Catholics are a demographic that is desperately in need of ministry. But in a ministry that, we get too much into that. I think that idea of the only two options are condemn or affirm. And with like everything that we do in life, and and I think when it comes to this, we see that there are people who are like, let's we've got to just no, the divorced people have no place in the Catholic, like what you're talking about, or at least if that's not what they actually think, that's certainly how they act.
That's the message that comes across. Yeah.
And that's what someone who is divorced then feels. And then on the other side, you go, if people who go, look, this whole annulment thing is messed up. Let's just get rid of it, and let's just, everybody is welcome. Let's just, everybody just come on in and be you.
It's just Catholic divorce anyway. What's the real difference, right? Yeah.
And I think that does a huge disservice to people as far as this opportunity to grow so much closer to God. Again, this is something I mentioned in my book, but I'm someone who generally, if people talk about like mystical experiences and stuff like that and visions or whatever, I'll be like, okay, sure, okay.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Let's just hear it. Go ahead, fine, whatever. But I in my whole life, I think I've had 2 mystical experiences, and both of them were during that time of going through the annulment process, and one of them was, I was just it was so painful, not just the divorce was awful, the separation was awful, and the annulment, reckoning with that, and reckoning with who I was and where I needed to change, and especially because at first I was like, no, I'm good. I did everything right. It's there. All the problems were on her end, and that kind of thing. It's like,
clearly, I'm not the one at fault. Yeah.
To reckon with how wrong I was about that, it was super painful. And I was going through that, and I don't think I was praying as much as I was, railing against God of like, why are you doing this to me? I've tried to do the right thing. I tried so hard to do what you wanted, and why is it so awful, and why is this so painful, and I had a vision of seeing Christ with his cross, and him just telling me that he was sharing his love with me in that, and suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, this is an experience where I'm not suffering. Like, Christ didn't come to suffer so that he could understand what suffering was. And suffering isn't just good in that I get stronger as I go through it or something like that. Suffering is good for me in that Christ is sharing one of the most intimate parts of his life with me in that. In that I'm feeling rejected by my bride, and I'm seeing the crucifixion and going, oh yeah, I did that to you. I rejected you. And Christ go, and in that moment going, but Christ is embracing his cross. He's embracing me even as I'm crucifying him and going, I love you. And that's why I'm doing this for you. And that it doesn't just make my suffering go away. I'm like, oh, well, it's nothing. I'll take the cross I came in with. Thank you, Christ. It's, but just going, this is an opportunity, if I will let it, to let my heart be crucified and to show love for not only the person whose life I have shared for these last couple of years and who I didn't share well, but also to show love for the woman in the future who I will come to know and will come to be my bride, to change myself into the man that I need to be, so that I can be present myself with someone who's got the strength to carry a cross for her. So,
Whew. Man, we're recording this during Holy Week right now. This will come out until May when the season 4 of Stranger Things comes out. But this is like the meditation I needed to hear during Holy Week to like get me ready. So it reminded me of the speech that I started this with. It's a letter from Jim Hopper to 11, his adopted daughter, and about her growing up. And he's saying, I felt like I'm in this cave where I like don't have feelings. But he's saying, like, when it hurts, life will hurt, but remember the hurt is good because it means you're out of the cave. It means you're like experiencing life. And I think kind of the Christian spin on it, which you just articulated beautifully, is that there's something in the hurt which helps not Christ to understand us, but helps us to understand Christ and to come to him with humility, even in our rage, even in our misunderstanding, to being like, what the F, God? I thought I was doing things. I'm doing the best I can here. I'm trying my best, or at least I'm trying to try my best. And like, why are things terrible? And Jesus's response, as you said, is not, I'm going to make it all go away. Jesus's response is, I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah. I'm with you. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. It's still a yoke. But I am with you, and you can unite your cross to mine, and I'm going to walk this with you. And something about my heart, if you're open to it, something about my heart and my love for you is going to be revealed to you through this. And there is redemption. Like on the other side of the cross, there is resurrection. And we might not see all that in this life, but we'll see it in the next life. Right. And anyway, so thank you for sharing that. And I think, I think you encapsulated the Paschal mystery that we're celebrating right now during Holy Week very well. So thank you. All right, so we're almost out of time, but we talked about the nerds, we talked about friends, we talked about romance, and then we talked about annulment, which I didn't know we were going there, but that was great. So thank you for that. And then we got to talk about the cool kids. Okay. Yeah. So in the first season, Steve, who is like the cool kid, but then turns out later not to be that cool. Like Robin in the last season is making fun of him for being a nerd, and he only has friends who are like younger than him. Okay. And then you have the new cool kid in town, Billy. And then you have Nancy in the first season, who's not cool, but is trying to be cool and kind of leaves behind her friend Barb because she's trying to be cool. So anyway, I wanted to talk about the cool kids and why do we always try? I mean, I did. I don't know if you did, but so many of us are always trying to be cool and popular and liked. Like, why is that so alluring to us? Like, what do you think?
I mean, I think it comes down to something that we talked about right in the first part of we are looking for love and we're willing to settle for acceptance.
Ooh, okay.
And it seems that if people accept us, or better yet, if people think we're cool, then what that means is that somehow how we're loved, and if we're adored, then we're loved. I've been listening to Rob Lowe's recent book called "Stories I Only Tell My Friends," and he talks in there about how he, kind of became this like, teenage idol when he had a brush of it when he was 15 years old, and then more when he was 18 and, did The Outsiders and that kind of thing. But when he was 15, this idea that, like nobody at his, like he was not popular in school. And like, but he had girls his age who, he just wanted the attention of people his age at his school. And he had, girls running after him and chasing after him and trying to, tear his hair out and stuff like that. And he was like, this thought that he had, as that was happening was, you wouldn't, if you really knew me, you wouldn't think I was cool. Because the people at his school knew him and didn't think he was cool. And I think that that's something that we struggle with, the disconnect between when we're honest with ourselves about who we are and what we think the people around us or the world wants from us. I think most of us end up feeling not cool and wishing that we could be either what people think of us, or we have a disconnect there and we go, I wish I could be, I wish other people would think better of me, because I feel like I've got this stuff to offer, this world and this life, and to know, and I think that comes from, like, part of us knows that we are created by God out of love, for a great work, and that there's a hollowness to what the world will ever recognize out of that, and some of it can be more interesting to us, of like, if there's adulation and there's obsession, and or if we're one of the cool kids, but inside we know that, whether I'm a nerd or a cool kid, the way that people see me and the way that the world sees me is hollow compared to what God has put in me.
Yes, absolutely. So what this is making me think of is going back to Aristotle. So Aristotle and Plato, and then later on Augustine and Aquinas in the church, taught that the soul is kind of broken into these three parts. There's like the appetites, which is like your desires for like food and safety and sex, like your basic physical desires for security and all those sorts of things. Then there's what they call your passions, or your spirit, depending on how you translate it, which is like your desire for relationship and respect and honor. And then there's the rational part of your soul, which seeks the truth and goodness and beauty. What they say is that the life of happiness, like a life of thriving, and I think the Greek word is eudaimonia, they can't be the life of satisfying the appetites. They call that the life of gratification, because if you just gratify your appetites, every base desire you have, you go after, pretty sure you become a slave to them and you become addicted. So that can't be the path to happiness. If you go after the life of honor, where you are seeking the esteem and the honor and the relationship of everybody, then one, quality over quantity. Like, how many lonely famous people are there? A ton, right? And two, like, public opinion changes so fast. Like, just what happens to Steve, he's cool, then he's not. Like, your happiness is so precarious, and it depends on the opinions of other people. So that's not true happiness either. He says the only true happiness can be when you're seeking the true, the good, and the beautiful through the rational part of your soul. And then Augustine and Aquinas will take that and they say, well, that is God. God is the truth, the goodness, all goodness and all beauty. And we can come to know him and love him and be known and loved by him, a little bit in this life and fully in the next, through this life of prayer and charity, in the sacraments. And so when I see Steve go from number one cool kid with the cool hair, getting whatever girl he wants, and then in the later seasons, he's just made fun of and beat up, but he's got these really great relationships with like Lucas and the younger kids, where he's really becoming this older brother, and he's so much happier, even though he's far less cool. And so I think the advice for me that I would give to myself when I was younger is a quality over quantity of relationships. I remember in middle school, I'd had my same three best friends for like all of elementary school. Brian, Kevin, and Sean, and we were like super tight. We did everything together. And I became friends in middle school with one of the cool kids, and he invited me to come sit with him at lunch one day. And it was like all the pretty girls and the guys with the cool clothes. And so I started sitting with those people at lunch, even though I wasn't really friends with more than like one of them. And I stopped sitting with my friends that I'd been friends with for, since kindergarten. And I was still friends with them. But I remember in 8th grade being like, I'm becoming cool. But like I wasn't happier, like I spent most of the time thinking like, what do these people think about me? What do these people think about me?
Yeah.
And even as an adult, it's so tempting to, look online and see what my friends are posting on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and be like, man, they got such cool lives, man, their relationship with their significant other or with their kids, or they get to travel. They have such cool jobs. They have this much money. They're doing cool things in their house. Like the envy game is so insidious. That commandment to not covet what your neighbor has, but it's so insidious to like see what other people have and like want to have it so that other people can see you and then think you're cool and click that like button and you get that dopamine hit. But it's all so hollow, as you were saying, you used that word hollow before, like they're so hollow. And man, like how different would our lives be if we could just remember on a daily basis, like, the Lord, only the Lord satisfies. Like the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I've been praying that psalm every day during Lent because I feel like I need to internalize this. Just like, and every time I get one of those desires where I just like, I'm feeling unloved or feeling insecure, or whatever. It's been a mantra to myself. It's like, I shall not want. The Lord is enough. God's grace is sufficient, So anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So I feel like we haven't talked that much about Stranger Things, but man, did we go deep.
We went straight into the upside down.
Straight into the upside down. I like that. That's great. Yeah, we went way deep on that. All right. So I told my listeners at the beginning of this episode that we would leave them with some things that they could implement into their lives today for how to live the gospel and how to experience and live God's love. So if you had one takeaway from what we've talked about today for how to live the gospel today when we shut off our phones and our computers, what would it be?
Well, one thing that I have found, actually the same confessor and spiritual director who talked about marriage and the ideals, a penance that he would frequently give me is and I think this dovetails really well into the idea of this set of 4 friends at the center of Stranger Things is pick 3 friends or family members or that kind of, pick 3 people important in your life and find a way to do an act of love for them today. And even if they're not near to you, if they're, far away, find a way to do an act of love for them today. Because, and that's it. That's
great. That's very, very, very practical. So yeah, a lot of times I ask my guests that and they're it's not that practical. So I like that. It's simple, it's practical, you can do it. And yeah, I think that's how you know a goal is good, is like, you can definitely tell when you've done it. Like, when you've done something nice for 3 people, if you're just like, I'm going to be more loving today. Like, how do you know at the end of it if you've been more loving? So that's really good. Yeah. Mine is going to be when you were talking about going through the hard times and seeing that as like that's an opportunity for a mystical experience. Like that's an opportunity to go deep in your relationship with God. And again, not that makes it any easier necessarily. Not right. I think it does make it somewhat easier. Like there's definitely a consolation of faith that goes along with it. But I think the reminder for me is that when there's something hard, to try to have the perspective of the Lord is here with me. Jesus is here with me. He knows and he's present with me. And there's a way that I can grow closer to his heart through this. There's a way that I can grow in love through this. So that's going to be my takeaway. Listeners, we'd love to hear what your takeaway is. You can throw that in the comments if you want. Kaiser, this has been awesome. We're going to close in prayer in a second. But before we do that, can you tell us just where can we find you? If people want to know more about Kaiser Johnson, where can they go?
Best places are probably, the 3 places. So I have a website, Kaiser-Johnson.com, Kaiser-Johnson.com. There's a lumber company that already took it without that. So, otherwise on Twitter and Instagram, I'm just at Kaiser Johnson.
Great.
And those are good places.
Awesome. And I'll put all of those in the show notes. So listeners, if you want to check those out, you can check those out. So any cool things that you're doing right now that you need to tell people about? Your book just came out, right?
Yeah. So How to Be Miserable and Alone is out. And in that, like I said, it's a true story about, it's not a story about my life as much as it is. I break down the 12 simple rules of how to be miserable and alone. And if you follow those, as I have, you too can be miserable and long. Luckily, I've also found that there are better rules for living a life that matters.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, we just kind of go through a bunch of different things and each chapter starts with a real quote from like a current magazine or blog or, influencer and that kind of thing. And then contrast it with a saint quote. And then we kind of look at the advice that we're getting over the course of that and through personal anecdotes and stories about my life and career in LA and my experiences and experiences of my friends who also, live and work and that kind of thing. So
great. And then you also have a book called Grit and Glory, which correct me if I'm wrong, but is about like, working out and fitness and healthy body, but also like to connecting to the spiritual life.
It's about, the spirituality of fitness.
Yeah, that's great. Listeners, if you're just listening and not watching, Kaiser is like a really good looking, fit, buff guy. So,
thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. All right. So, would you, Kaiser, would you close us in prayer about all the things that we've been talking about today?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Listeners, viewers, wherever you are, as long as you're not driving, take a moment, close your eyes, and let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Lord, thank you for giving us this day, this opportunity in countless opportunities in this day to love, to be a better friend, to be a better partner, to be a better son or daughter, not just of our own parents, but to you, Lord. Please give us the courage to embrace our crosses and follow you, and to embrace them with the knowledge that you are embracing them with us and you're embracing us in that. Please give us the grace to love as you love. In your name, amen.
Amen. In the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Kaiser, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us today and to share so vulnerably about your story. I know there's a lot of people that are going to connect with your experiences and what you've gone through. So thank you so much for being with you. It was really a pleasure.
It's really my pleasure too. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Very good. So this is Pop Culture Catechism. We are one of the shows on Awaken Catholic. If you want to find out more, you can go to popculturecatechism.com. And if you would like to support this show and help us out, the one way that you can really do that is by sharing this episode with somebody who you think would really connect with this. Maybe they're a fan of Stranger Things. Maybe it's somebody who's gone through some of the things that we talked about or just could benefit from this message. So there's somebody you know. Would you send it to them in a text or an email or something like that? We'd really appreciate it. And if you really like what you're doing and you want to help what we're doing and you want to help it reach more people, you can go to popculturecatechism.com and become a patron of this show. We have 6 tiers of giving where you can pick a giving level that fits your monthly budget or your monthly tithe, and you can support all the work that goes on through Awaken Catholic and all the shows like this one. And with each giving level, you get certain bonuses and perks. There's exclusive content for each episode that only patrons get. So all my talks that I give in my speaking ministry are in there. I'm uploading new talks all the time. And also for every episode, there's exclusive content. So for this episode, as season 4 of Stranger Things comes out, I'm going to give my little review and thoughts. That'll come out in May and July, but only if you're a patron. So patrons, check that out on popculturecatechism.com. Also, please download the Awaken app. That's where patrons get access to all the exclusive content, but it's also a free app for everyone. It's got a Catholic music library, a Catholic prayer library. It's a great community of like-minded people, Catholics and Christians. It's growing all the time and just a great place to avoid some of the toxicity that goes on some other social media stuff. So if you haven't gotten the Awaken app, please download it. And thank you for supporting our show and for listening. We'll see you next time. God loves you. A special thank you and shout out to all of our patrons who make this show possible, but especially Carl and Melissa Gore, Lisa and Bob Tenney, Stephen Maggie Hubbard, Rob Smith, and Tom and Emily Camberiotti. Thank you so much.